Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the Athlon Heras SPR 2-12. Now, full disclosure on this optic is that it was sent out to me by a kind viewer of the channel, so I didn't pay for it whatsoever. I have no relationship with Athlon. I have tested some of their products in the past and chatted with some of their guys at different shows. In the future, they might send something out, who knows, but no external involvement for this video. Now, when it comes to Athlon and 2-12s, most of you are probably more familiar with the Heras BTR Gen 2. The Heras 2.5-12 that we have here is the cheaper, worse version of that scope, and counterintuitive to the perfidious naming convention, is not an SPR scope despite what the box says. Now, getting into basics of the Heras, we have a 12-inch long body, and it does come with an additional 3-inch sunshade. Weight comes in at just over 23 ounces, and the main tube is unfortunately only a 1-inch tube. Now, that isn't the end of the world, but I think it's the only 1-inch tube that I have ever tested on the channel, so I actually had to use some ring adapters to get it to fit in my mounts. Having a 1-inch tube can limit your light transmission, limit your internal adjustment, and it's also viewed as a low quality, low cost spec, whether or not that's actually the case. Getting into the turrets, our elevation is unlocked, but does have a zero stop, which is a nice touch, but I wish it was locking. The windage turret, however, is a lift to unlock style, which is definitely preferable if it isn't just outright capped for this sort of mid-range scope. On the left-hand side of the body, we have our parallax, which goes from infinity all the way down to 10 yards. In terms of the feels, the turrets feel good, not super mushy. They are tactile, audible, and perfectly suitable for this price range. Moving back, we have our magnification ring, which is a smooth, easy 180-degree throw from 2-12. Now, the 12x mark is highlighted orange because, as we are heading towards shortly, this is a second focal plane scope, and the reticle is only true at that 12x magnification. Finishing out the body, we have a diopter at the back to adjust the reticle to your eyes. Everybody's eyes are a little bit different, so just make sure the reticle looks good to you. Now, talking about usability, your eye relief is set at about 3.5 inches throughout the magnification range. Of course, at the low end, it's going to be more forgiving forward and back. Definitely not bad. At 2x, the eye box is very forgiving, which is of course your up, down, left, and right. And as you zoom into 12x with that 42mm objective, it does tighten up a little bit, but it's still very usable, which is one of the nice things about these smaller mid-range scopes in general. When you don't have a crazy top end and you still have a decent sized objective, they tend to be fairly easy to use, and the Heras 2-12 is no different. Field of view is rated at 55 feet at 100 yards at 2x magnification, which is right on the edge of being really good and probably above average for this style of scope. Getting into the reticle, this is the AAGR1 mil. I have no idea what that stands for. It is one of the simplest mil stadia reticles out there. Within the reticle at 12x magnification, you have 8.5 mils, which is more than enough for most situations and calibers, especially for only 12x magnification. The center point of aim is a very small, refined floating dot, which is nice. I actually did use this scope for some of the accuracy testing that's coming up shortly on the channel, and in general, I prefer the simple floating dot as my point of aim. If you are dialing your elevation, you do have a nice enough 0.1 mil increments in the windage stadia, but of course, if you are using your drops in the reticle, you will need to dial your wind or stare into the nothingness and hope that it doesn't stare back. Needless to say, the reticle is lacking a lot of features that you would want for a SPR scope, but of course they aren't using that acronym the same way we are. Insert meme here.
I don't think it means what you think it means.
No wind, no ranging. It's not great. Workable, but it's definitely not doing you any favors. Getting to the glass, this is one area where Athlon has done really well with a lot of their optics. Yes, it is just cheap Chinese glass, but it looks decent, especially for the money. It's bright enough, the colors are punchy, there is some chromatic aberration, and things can get a little milky at the top end, especially at distance. You are going to notice a clarity difference between this cheaper glass and something like the Maven 2.5-15 that I'm also testing currently, but for literally 25% the cost, the Heras SPR 2-12 looks pretty good for the money. So wrapping all of this up, we have a MSRP of $360 and a street price of about $300 or just under. Now the name of the scope is the Heras SPR scope, but it's really just not. And if you look inside the manual, it will say that its ideal use case is hunting, and it's actually a good scope for that sort of thing. What are its good points? Price, weight, and glass quality, again relative to price. All of those things can make it good for a hunting style application. However, for a SPR style scope, its second focal plane, when most, if not all, would prefer first focal plane, its reticle doesn't help you out at all. It's a 1-inch tube, which is going to turn off a lot of people. It can technically work as an SPR scope, but again, if you're shooting at targets from 1 to 600 yards in varying winds and you need to engage targets quickly, I would recommend almost any other scope. In fact, the scope that I would recommend is actually already made by Athlon. It's just not called the SPR, it's called the 2-12 Helios BTR Gen 2, whatever all of that is supposed to mean. Now that optic is unfortunately a large jump in price. It's sitting at around $500 on the street currently, but you can find deals and get it a little bit closer to $400, which is, only about $100 jump, and you do get a lot more performance out of it. If you are on a super tight budget, maybe you are willing to live with the downsides of the quote-unquote SPR scope and work around its shortcomings, but if you actually want to deploy something in an SPR style application, which to me means engaging targets at different distances quickly and efficiently, this isn't that style of scope. It's an SPR, again, in name only. Now for me personally, in my situation where I'm currently living, I can basically shoot as far as I want. In fact, I was actually using this scope against the Maven RS.1. That one there I stretched all the way out to 1200 yards, and of course that reticle gives you a lot more capability quickly versus if you're having to dial your drop and wind for different distances. It's going to slow you down quite a bit. So when it comes to using it like an SPR, where again you are engaging targets at different distances, you probably want some sort of mill grid, MOA grid, something like that to give you a quick reference point, as opposed to dialing and holding into space if again you're not dialing your wind in between switching targets. So this isn't a bad scope, it's just not an SPR scope. But with all of that out of the way, let me know what you think of the Athlon Heras SPR 2-12x42. Let me know if there are other scopes in this price range that I should check out. Probably the next one on the list is the new Vortex Venom 3-15. That seems to pack a lot of punch for not much more money. I think it's only about $60 more expensive and has just about all of the features that people want. So that's probably next on the list, and we will go from there. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. God bless.